Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us at the ever-improving No Soundbites Allowed podcast. My name is Michael Vasquez. We thank you for joining us in this adventure of describing the politics that go on in our nation on a personal and local level as often as possible, giving you, the audience, more than just 30 seconds to understand what's going on in our nation. We look forward to joining you as we go. Just sit back, enjoy the ride. Please remember, if you like the episodes, like it, share it, let other people know, and if you can, please donate, even if it's $2, even if it's $5, because it all makes a difference. We thank you, and here we go. Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us at the ever-popular No Soundbites Allowed with your host, Michael Voss, the Dragon of the Southern Tier, and I'm always happy to be here with you. I thank everyone for being here today. We're going to have some fun. It's going to be a great show. In fact, I want to start off with, we have a very special guest here with us, who I'm very happy to introduce. We're going to be speaking with Assemblyman Clifford Crouch of the 122nd District. He's here with us right now. Can you hear us all right?
Yes, I can, Mike.
Oh, fantastic. And everyone, so we're very happy to have Assemblyman Crouch with us. It's the first time he's been on with us. Just for a little bit of background, I know you're in the 122nd District. You do have an election this year, and we'll be talking a little bit about that. And you've had several bills that you've passed, and you've been in for quite some time. Actually, rather than me say it, let me just let you go right ahead and tell the listeners a little bit about yourself.
Well, I've been in office for 23 years in the Assembly, and prior to that, I was on the town board in Bainbridge since 1981 to 1986. I was supervisor for the town of Bainbridge up until 1995, which I ran for the Assembly, and I've been in the Assembly since then.
That is quite a record there. In fact, it's even a little more impressive than that. Is it correct? It's 2008 the last time that you had anyone challenge you?
It was 2006. I've had basically two opponents in 23 years since I was first elected, which, frankly, I think it says I've been responsible in voting the conscience of my district.
No, that's quite something. And for people who are not aware, and just to let them know, you are a Republican, and we are in New York State, a very, very blue state. So for the opportunity for an assemblyman or any elected official to go so long, 23 years, and especially going in the last, since 2006, you're talking about 12 years there, without having a challenger. That's an impressive statement. That says a lot.
Well, I have a lot of supporters out there from both sides of the aisle, which I'm very proud of. They freely, from the Democratic side, a lot of them freely admit I'm the only Republican they ever vote for. And I appreciate that. That means I'm voting the conscience of the district. And I mean, some of the Democrats say I don't always agree with your votes, but I like what you do. So that gets into the usual legwork of being a legislator, which constituent service through the district office, especially people seem to appreciate the fact that we help them out individually with unwinding some of their problems.
No, that is one of the important things there. And it's quite impressive, I have to tell you. And I think it should be mentioned as well. Do I have it correct? You're currently, you were born in 1945, so that makes you 73?
I'm 73. That's correct.
Okay. Because it doesn't come across in your voice, and I'm pretty sure most people wouldn't think that you, with the amount of work that you do in the Assembly District, they may be a little surprised by that. So that's
I'm very active, Mike. I mean, I do anything I want to do. I'm physically active when I'm home, doing outside work, and of course I joke to the doctors. They want to know my exercise routine. I tell them I run every 2 years.
That'll do it. I was actually going to say, do you golf?
Well, some people will not call it golf, but I do have a set of clubs, and I take those little white balls out and have a lot of fun.
So do I. That sounds like my golf game. What would you say is your handicap?
Oh, we got to be shooting at about 30.
Okay, don't feel bad. That's me.
I didn't start golfing until I was 50, and I'm basically a tournament golfer. I golf occasionally with my son or my two son-in-laws as a family outing, that type of thing. And that's one thing about golf. It gets you out, regardless of age. Basically you can enjoy it as a family outing. I've gotten my granddaughter interested in golf now, and my two grandsons interested in golf. So that's what really makes it a lot of fun.
It is. It is. I didn't start golfing until I was about 33, myself, and I don't get to go out as often as I would like to. But one of the great things about it I always found is once you do go out there, it doesn't matter who you're with, you're going to be out there for 3-4 hours.
Sure.
And you're going to know them. You're going to have a friend by the time you're done.
That's right. It's a great equalizer, if you will, as far as just getting to know people, talking about, what they do, certain issues that come up. And I always enjoy the golf tournaments, in support of, say, Mom's House or some other charity. They're always fun because it's typically best ball. And so you end up taking shots from everybody. Mm-hmm. It's just a lot of fun.
It is a great way to play golf. And I do enjoy it. It's one of my pleasures as well. Don't get to do it much, but I do enjoy it. But I did want to also take a moment, not only to let people know who you are and some of the things about you, because that's important for voters and just anyone in general to understand who it is that is representing them, whether it's at local or state or federal levels. But because people don't connect very often with who are they talking to. But I do also want to speak about the record, speak about some of the issues. And I know you've been around for a long time, and I know it's a difficult thing to be in the New York State Assembly. There's only 40 Republicans out of the 148 members. Is that right?
Yeah, typically 150 members. I think we've got a couple of empty seats at this point in time.
Right.
And we just went through some special elections. I think our numbers are 40, 42, somewhere in there. I haven't had an opportunity since the special elections to just count noses, if you will.
Yeah, I haven't looked at that. You're out of session at the moment. You should mention that as well. Session just ended, and you're in summer break, and then everyone will be coming back. So I don't look at it until everyone gets back.
Right.
But there's several bills that you have worked on that are kind of interesting, and you should have a cross section there. There's a couple of them that I know, like Bill A00728. Now, this is about illegal aliens in schools, which is an interesting bill because it's basically a bill to identify illegal aliens and to affect their whether they're getting funded in schools, if I'm understanding that bill correctly. And I know that's something that you sponsored yourself. What brought that about?
Well, if you think there is an issue with illegal aliens in the United States and especially here in New York, and I just felt that, as tough as it is to get into colleges sometimes, and a lot of colleges reach their max of students, they turn people away, have much more applications than empty seats, quite frankly. So I just felt that those empty seats should be reserved for the citizens and legal individuals to be able to attend college here in New York. How would you feel if your son or a daughter applied to a college and she was refused due to lack of available seats, if you will, and only to find out that there was 40 or 50 illegal aliens that were taking up the space? I don't think that's right.
No, I agree completely. I'm a very big advocate of legal immigration. And I know it's one of the big issues in our state as well as our nation. And a lot of people are talking about that. So it's an important bill. Considering the nature of New York State, I know you have a couple of co-sponsors with Kolb, Miller, Brabenec, as well as Finch and Hawley. What do you feel, based on your experience, how likely is that bill to get through?
It probably will not go anywhere. Obviously, the majority in the Assembly is the Democratic side, and they are, very soft on immigration issues, and they don't like this bill because it's an opportunity. I look at it as an opportunity for our legal citizens to have opportunity to be in college, and they're looking at it as a way to keep the illegal aliens from going to college. And I followed our Congress over the years because this immigration issue is not something that's just new in the last year.
No, it's been going on for a long time.
Needed to be fixed a long time ago. We've known that people are coming in all the time illegally, and they need to have a way to become legal. We're never going to get enough buses together to, take them out of the country, and so we need to address it up front. And by making a process that if you're here illegally, that you can become a citizen, and obviously it'll save us in the long run a lot of money in enforcement and things like that. But it's an issue that it's not going away until Congress addresses it.
That's for sure. It's never going to go away. But on the state level, there are things we can do. And I know it's related to, in speaking about this bill, it's related to Governor Cuomo's push for New York State to become, as he said in 2013, New York to become the progressive capital of the nation and a sanctuary state. Is that something that you oppose, or do you see merit in that?
I adamantly oppose that. Number one, we have federal laws that we should be adhering to, and for the states to go rogue and start creating sanctuary cities and states, I just don't agree with that. We're a country of rules and regulations and laws, and we have a constitution that we should uphold. So let's look at the process that we can accept people into this country and not have to worry about illegal aliens all the time.
No, I can understand that completely. I also had wanted to speak about, there was another bill, and there's a couple that we're going to try and get to if we have enough time. But I think a bill that a lot of people haven't heard about, and I think deserves a subject that deserves a little more attention. You have a bill, which is A05935. And by the way, folks, if you ever want to, you can just go to assembly.state.ny.us. That'll bring you to the Assembly site. You can put in the bill numbers. Excuse me. You can put in the bill numbers that we're speaking about, and you'll be able to see these bills and see everything about it, what's its status, who's voted for it, who created it, and also what the bill itself says. Oops. Just always like to mention that for people. Mm-hmm. But in this bill, and again, it's 05935. This is a bill for people with developmental disabilities, and that's also one that you've sponsored. And I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about that bill, a little more detail of what brought you to that.
Well, about 4 years ago, we were in the midst of depopulating the Broome Developmental Center and moving a whole bunch of people with developmental disabilities out into community homes. And I brought it up to our conference in Albany, talking about the rights of some of these people that I thought they were just being pushed into homes when they didn't want to go. And so our minority leader, Brian Kolb, came back to me and said, why don't you head up a task force on the rights of people with developmental disabilities? And I gladly took that on. I traveled the state with it. I had 11 different forums across the state, from Long Island to Buffalo to the North Country, and even here in Binghamton. I held a forum right here in Binghamton at SUNY Broome, looking at taking testimony, quite frankly, from caregivers, parents of people with developmental disabilities, and also from individuals with disabilities. The professional people, the ones that are actually performing certain assistance programs for people, and so there was a wide variety of people that testified, and we put together a report and of all the findings. Transportation was a big thing, and housing was another thing. There's about 12,000 people waiting for a bed in a community home in the state, and it could be a 1-year waiting period.
Mm-hmm.
That's unacceptable. I mean, so we've actually trampled on some of their rights, and I felt very strongly about that. But what this legislation does, basically, it puts forward the rights for people with developmental disabilities, and there's a number of them in there. And I just felt very strongly that this should be in legislation. And I think a lot of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle think so too, but because it's a Republican bill, they've held it in committee for consideration, as they call it. But I just think that, here's people that can't stand up for themselves oftentimes, literally, and can't speak for themselves, and yet we deny them certain rights. And this is all in response to the Olmstead decision, which is back in 1999, and the court held that the states are required to place people with developmental disabilities in settings that where they have basically the least amount of restrictions. But there's three things that, in order to comply with the Olmstead decision, these placements has to be appropriate for the individual. The individual did not oppose to the transfer from institutional care or to a less restrictive setting, and also the placement can be reasonably accommodated, taking into account the resources available to the state and others with mental or physical disabilities. So there's three things there, and in my mind, I think the second one, that I don't think a lot of these people were asked where they wanted to go, or they were just removed from Broome Developmental Center and put into community homes. I'm not saying that they're getting poor care or anything like that, but I think we've actually isolated them even more, because at the Broome Developmental Center, they had a bowling alley there, they had a swimming pool, they could watch a movie, they could have lunch with 25 or 30 of their friends, all in a community lunchroom. And yet now they're in community homes. They only interface with 5 or 6 or 7 other residents there, and so, of course, they're a relatively small amount of caregivers, and as compared to Broome Developmental Center. And I'm not saying that we should put them back, but at least we should have acknowledged their right to speak up or have their preference considered of where they wanted to go. Some people were put in apartments, and that's perfectly fine. I have no problem with that. I'm glad that it was recognized that that's where they want to go. So some of I'm not saying it's all bad. A lot of it's been good, but the housing issue has not been solved. The transportation issue has not been solved to this date. We hand-delivered the report to the governor's office and the Office of People with Developmental Disabilities. The governor's office never responded, and we never really got any kind of acknowledgement out of OPWDD either.
You would think that the governor would be interested in this. I mean, especially given Governor Cuomo's nature of being very active in election years. You would think, and the nature of this bill, helping people, especially people who can't necessarily help themselves as fully as, say, the average citizen and resident. Right. You would think this would be something that would gain a lot more interest, because I can see even in the committee, no one had an argument about this. So that's right. You would think it would go through very easily. Does it matter?
Quite frankly, Mike, I am always one that works to get things done. I always just look at any majority member, if they want to come pick up this piece of legislation and sponsor it, put their name first, put mine second. I'm open to that. I've done that with a number of pieces of legislation over the years. I always work to get things done, and not in a partisan manner. And I haven't, unfortunately, had any majority member at this point in time come to pick up this legislation. But I think it's very important that at least we've stated in statute that people with developmental disabilities have these rights. It's like our Bill of Rights to the Constitution. It's stated there what we can expect, and this legislation basically gives the families and the people with developmental disabilities basically a legislative doctrine that says you are entitled to these rights.
No, it's an important thing.
something I needed. Now I see I had a reason. I was bummed out, stressed out, yeah. Think you made me feel the best I had. For a minute I thought I needed you. Now I'm seeing through all of the reasons that I made up in my head. I'm breaking the habit. I'm breaking the habit. I'm breaking the habits that I had, 'cause look where it's got me. Searching for myself, didn't know I lost me. I ain't no saint. Let the devil have a way. I regret it every day. I was bummed out, stressed out, yeah. Think you made me feel the best I had. For a minute I thought I needed you. Now I'm seeing through all of the reasons that I made up in my head. I'm breaking the habit. I'm breaking the habit. I'm breaking the break the habit. Oh, break the habit. Break the habit. Kill, 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 kill. Break the habit. Oh, break the habit. Break the habit. Kill, 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 kill. Break the habit. Oh, break the habit. Break the habit. Kill, 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 kill. Break the habit. Oh, break the habit. Break the habit. Kill, kill. I'm breaking the habit. I'm breaking the habit. I'm breaking the I'm breaking the habit. I'm breaking the
I've spoken to several people in the Assembly and on the Republican side, back when now Congresswoman, then Assemblywoman Claudia Tenney had been in. She had mentioned to me, and I've heard this from others, that as a Republican, if you don't have someone doing a co-sponsor, if they're not, Democrats not taking it on, we can't pass anything. In fact, it's been since 1973 since a Republican put through a major bill through the Assembly, as I recall. Is that still accurate?
Pretty much. I mean, I had one statewide bill since I've been in office that was still under my name. I've had other pieces of legislation that was passed that I basically authored. Then I worked with a majority sponsor to fine-tune it to the point where they took it and put their name on it, and then it was passed in the Assembly, and we worked to get a Senate sponsor on some stuff like that. When shortly after I first got in, I had two school districts that were voting to merge.
Right.
And I had calls from Florida saying, how come we can't have an absentee ballot on a merger vote? And we quickly looked, and no, it was not allowed. It was not stated in law that that's an opportunity for you. You could have an absentee ballot on a school budget vote, but not on a school merger vote. So I drafted the legislation, and I was quite surprised. It literally flew through the Education Committee and had a Senate sponsor, and basically it passed under my name. So, knowing that I'm in the minority, I certainly appreciated that. But how it got there, I can't explain some of the reasons why they chose to do that. But it was a simple bill, but very important as far as voting rights for people in school districts. So I'm very, very proud that that went through.
And sometimes it's the simple bills that can be the most important ones. They don't all have to be stunning.
Yeah.
But I do have to ask you about, and since we are on a subject that I think is interesting, I'm a very strong advocate of the Second Amendment. I follow a lot of bills out there. And I know that recently Governor Cuomo has been trying to push a set of bills which are called red flag or extreme risk protection orders. And I know that one of the bills, which is A11148, is one of those. There's 5 of these bills. This is one of them that has had a vote. I know one has not had a vote, and there's actually 2 that did actually have a vote. And back in June, as a matter of fact, June 13th, there was a vote on this. Now, just as a quick summary for people on what is a red flag, and please tell me if I'm wrong here, Assemblyman. Essentially, an extreme risk protection order allows someone to say that individual X is a danger to themselves and or their community, to go in, take their guns, and go to the court, mention that. The court gives a warrant that allows the police to come in, take those firearms, and the person then gets the right of due process to go and try and prove that they're innocent. So it denies due process, and through that takes away the Second Amendment rights. Is that a good understanding of?
Pretty much. There was a similar bill that was voted on, I believe it was back in March, and it had a fair amount of support. It didn't go quite to the extent of this one.
Actually,
I honestly don't remember all the ins and outs of that one, but a number of us supported that one at the time.
Yes, you did vote for it. It was Bill.
Because, certainly we want to be able to, if there's a danger, some domestic violence danger or something like that, or some individual has been identified that could be a harm to themselves or others, we want to make sure that they're not possessing firearms. We have to make sure that they can't obtain firearms for everybody's safety. The problem I had with this bill, it seemed to take law enforcement out of the picture, and it expanded those that could request an extreme risk protection to school officials, school teachers, and part-time employees of the school. Even so theoretically, even a janitor possibly could say, well, this person's going crazy. We need to have a order of protection. But it seemed to take law enforcement out of the picture, out of the process, and I don't think that's a good idea. I mean, law enforcement, they are well-trained individuals, more and more so every day, and I think they should be part of this process. Why wouldn't a teacher call a law enforcement officer or a superintendent and say, we have a problem here, and let them come in and assess the problem and carry forward with requesting an order of protection? The other thing is, it's a small item, but on the tail end of this, if it's proven that there's no risk to the individual or other issues have been taken care of, the family possession of firearms need to be restored, and it didn't seem to have a good due process of a person that owned a firearm but that was confiscated because it happened to be in the house of this person that was potentially mentally unstable. They didn't seem to be a good due process to restore the opportunity for that person to have their firearm returned.
That is one of the problems with the bill. I disagree with Bill A11148. Mm-hmm. Also, there is the fact that, and this is true of all the red flag laws, but this one in particular, since it also mentions the schools directly, if the home is too dangerous for a person to have the firearms and requires a basically secret action by the police to take away those firearms by the court order, then children in that household have to be taken away according to the rules and regulations of Child Protective Services, CPS. Mm-hmm. And that's true of all the red flag laws. And I don't think that's something that's a direct and immediate absolute consequence required by law that isn't getting a lot of attention with these red flag laws. Even though I know Governor Cuomo has recently started pushing it. He's been pushing it pretty strong. So I am confused though, because I agree with you. It's a bad law.
Well, it was a reaction to the shootings in Florida and Tennessee, where when you look at that, I mean, there were so many red flags that people didn't do their job. They didn't do their reporting. It was actually insane that the fact that everything came down and people ignored obvious signs and so forth, and very sad because people ended up losing their lives.
Of course, always. That's always a sad thing.
Yeah. If people had done their job per se, according to the laws that existed at that time, those incidents probably would not have happened.
Well, if the several steps that were missed and have been talked about very publicly, with the Parkland shooting, obviously if those steps were taken both by the public and or law enforcement, it'd be an entirely different scenario. But, since you brought it up, the bill you were speaking about from March 6th is A08976. It has been passed by the Assembly, and it is waiting for the state Senate to put it forward. This is another bill. To my understanding, it is exactly the same as the one we had just been speaking about, except it doesn't allow for teachers to it allows for an individual in a household. It allows for a police officer or law enforcement to do everything we just described, but it doesn't include teachers. Otherwise, it is exactly the same bill, but you voted for that one. Yes. I'm confused.
And that was reasonably acceptable, given the situation of, what's happened. But to just expand it and not have the law enforcement obviously involved, I think it's a gross injustice at that point.
Okay. I was just asking for the clarification just because I see, on the one, you voted for, one you voted against, and the only difference I see is, since you brought it up, the difference is teachers. Take out teachers, and they're the same bill.
And other part-time employees.
Right. I know in the bill 11148, and I apologize, folks, that's the only way to describe these two the bills are exactly the same, so there's not even a name on them. But the bill 11148, let's call it the teacher red flag, would allow part-time, temporary coaches would be able to enact this process. And that's absolutely wrong. I think it's crazy. But it's just, okay. I understand your reasoning. It's just, I personally have publicly said I don't agree with any of the red flag laws. And I know I'm a Second Amendment man, and I don't see the difference between the two of them. But that's why everyone has a vote. Everyone has a voice, right? That's what we're
here. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And I just want to make sure that people get to hear, because, reading this stuff, it's very different when we're talking about it and understanding it, and understanding why people see things about it is very different than just looking at a piece of paper and says, here's a vote tally. And well, what does that mean? So I thank you for giving us that opportunity to understand your insight on it and what your motivations are. I think it's important. I think it's very important to know that. Now, I know your district is, you have 133,000 people in your district. And
that's correct. I think that's I don't know how accurate the number really is, because we obviously, I don't know if you just saw in the news the other day or this morning even, the number of people leaving New York State, and especially the Southern Tier. So I may be down a few hundred already.
Well, I know it's probably incorrect, because I know we've lost about 1.2 million people. And I'm glad you bring that up. We've lost 1.2 million people during the term of Governor Cuomo, where I think the top state being the exodus state in the nation. And we have been for about within the top three for the last 3 years, maybe 5 years now. And that means that coming up, well, actually that's the census. We'll talk about that, when 2020 gets a little closer. It's just we're going to be in trouble in this state. We're losing seats. It's a troubling thought. Is there any thought you have, or that you would suggest, or that anything that voters can do to try and help support, turning this around? Can they call into someone? Is there something that they can say or do that would help you, or just help the state in general that you can think of that maybe people aren't aware of?
Well, for the most part, I mean, people complain to me about their taxes, and again, it's property taxes, of which the governor has, tried to say that he's going to help everybody with their property taxes. He's had a couple programs, but bottom line, there's so many mandates that the state gives to our schools and our counties and stuff. That's what's been driving the property tax. We were able to get a cap on the Medicaid increases, which has certainly helped, because back a few years ago, maybe 10 years ago, maybe a little longer, that the county's only reason for increasing taxes was to cover the increase in Medicaid costs, and they had to cut back on roads and infrastructure costs in order to accommodate the increase in Medicaid costs. We're one of 2 states, I believe, that requires a local contribution from property tax to pay for Medicaid, and it's not just people on welfare. It's seniors in homes and things like that. It's a Medicaid cost to the state. That's kind of been what's driving people to leave. And even when we had the expansion of Lockheed Martin back a few years ago, a lot of people were building in Pennsylvania, and it's because of cheaper taxes and working in a factory in New York. So we've got to get a better handle on that. And the school mandates, I just met with some school officials a couple nights ago, and they're very concerned about where we're going, even with a 2% cap, because they are very restricted on what they can raise. But at the same time, the state requires them to do certain things, and I've heard that there's 130 to 150 reports actually that the schools have to fill out, and it's so much redundancy in those reports. Probably about 15 or 20 are actually read, but yet I've had superintendents say they could actually put possibly 2 teachers in the classroom in some school districts, where if they could just cut down, let's do 15 or 20 reports and have it done with. And so, I mean, there's mandates like that are raising our property taxes, causing them to be high. And then you put the 2% cap on there, but there's uncontrollable expenses, if you will, of health costs and certain issues like that, fuel costs, that it costs a certain amount of money to turn the lights on in a school, whether you've got a 10% increase in students or a 10% decrease in students. It's not, you can't apply the same percentage to the school budget just because you're losing students. And most schools are losing students, unfortunately. As we see the exodus out of New York State, it's affecting our schools, and so they get to be more and more costly to operate on a per student basis.
I thank you for that answer. And I know that we're a little bit over on time, and I do appreciate the fact that you've given us so much time to speak with you. And I know it's a busy schedule. You're out campaigning at the moment, as well as dealing with constituents. So I do appreciate this. I just have 2 questions, if I can.
Sure.
Then I'll let you go. The first one, it's been 12 years since you've had a challenger. This year, you actually have 2. You have the Libertarian, who happens to be Eric Bosworth. We have interviewed him in the past. And also you have a Republican challenger in gentleman Nick Libis, who's a first-time candidate, although he has a famous family name and has been around politics for some time. How do you feel getting back out, having the challenge? Is that invigorating? Is it something it's brand new? Is it like being the first time? I mean, how does that affect you going forward, do you think?
Well, every time we have an election every 2 years, basically, I have to, and I always have possibly expected an opponent. Haven't come to fruition for the last 12 years, which I'm appreciative of. But this one, a little bit surprised, because in a conversation with Mr. Libis, I chatted with him last fall, and he told me he would never run against me. He told me 3 times in our conversation. And so it's a little bit of a surprise that, here he is this spring, and he's running against me. That it is what it is. The other gentleman, I don't know. I'm not sure what his platform is going to be. Somebody said he was criticizing my office expense. And, that office expense pays my staff, pays for, our postage and things like that we mail out of the offices. And I maintain an office, a full-time person in the Albany office, and I have a full-time person here in the district office, plus a part-time person. So it pays their salaries and pays all the office expenses, any travel expenses that I have. So that's, my office expense. I can justify any of it and all of it. I don't think there's anything illegal there that, we need to look at. I've tried to be very on board about everything and very honest about everything. So, I'm not sure where he's coming from with that, but, it is what it is. Anybody's entitled to run, and I'll deal with it. Every election that I've had, even when I didn't have an opponent, I have gone out and done door to door. Not to the intensity of when I have an opponent, but still I take the opportunity. I've gone out door to door, and as one woman said, I knocked on her door. I'd never been on this one street, and she came to the door and said, well, who's running against you? And I said, actually, I don't have an opponent. And she looked at me and said, well, why are you here? And I said, because it gives me an opportunity to get out and meet new people. And if you have a problem, I'm standing on your doorstep to talk about it. So, that's the attitude I've always taken. People have been very appreciative of that because I'm always straightforward with people. I try to tell it like it is.
No, I understand absolutely. And just for clarification for people, Eric Bosworth is a libertarian. He, from what I understand, you're saying that he made the allegations about some kind of funding irregularity. I'm not aware of that. When we had an interview with him, he did not mention that on my program. So I'm not aware of that. I didn't know that he had that accusation out there.
Somebody had told me he made that comment. I think it was on Facebook, and criticized my office expense. So, like I say, I can justify anything that's on there.
No. The reason why I say that is if he had made such an allegation, and we're speaking with you now, I of course would give you the opportunity I would have brought it up and let you address it. So I don't want anyone to think I didn't do that. He didn't mention it to me. So, and as for Mr. Libis, I will be speaking with him as well. Obviously, we're covering everyone in the 122 and many other races as well, to give everyone the same opportunity so he can speak as well. But my last question for you is looking at, we've covered a bit of ground. We've covered a bit of what you voted on, your thoughts, what you as a person, and the challenge that is facing you. So, let me end this with the thought, is there something, I always like to try and end it with the thought, is there something that we have not covered that you believe is very important, or something that you need to get across that I haven't addressed? And I want to give you that opportunity now to say whatever it may be.
Well, I think I'll reiterate that I'll run on my record, basically. I'm proud of my record. I'm proud that I've been able to represent the 122nd district. And I think that's basically speaks for itself in a lot of ways. I've helped a lot of people with personal problems, and when they come to the office and so forth, I have great staff that help out. We try to address the issues of the district, and one of the issues that we've been working on is veterans issues. I have the Oxford Vets Home in my district, and they're lacking staff. I've been in touch with the Department of Health, who operates the Vets Home. We've worked with them to try to get more staff there. Obviously, we need to take care of our veterans. Worked hard to restore the Veterans Service Office in Sydney. It was a part-time office, and the state closed it down for a while, but we got it back in Sydney. And our veterans need to be taken care of. They need to have access to their services and somebody to explain things to them. And it's typically things like that we work hard on. Similarly, like the people with developmental disabilities, it was obviously a big issue in my district. So I've always tried to be out and responding to the needs of the district. And I think over time, that's worked well for me.
Well, I thank you for that, and thank you for sharing all of this with our listeners here. It sounds like everything's going crazy there on your side. I know we went over a little bit on time, so again, thank you, and we do appreciate the fact that you've given us this extra amount of time.
Not a problem, Mike. Thank you.
Thank you, Assemblyman Clifford Crouch. We'll let you get to your day, and we thank you very much for that.
You bet. Bye now.
let's grow old. Oh, we'll buy that house upon the hill. Oh, let's be that story told. Oh, we'll foreplay in the kitchen. Hell, I'll even do the dishes. Baby, let's grow old. Baby, let's grow old. I'll pull my act out of this bottle. In these hands I hold crease notes and paper dreams of the lives we're meant to lead. Baby, let's grow old. Let's grow old. Our hell living heaven won't deny us. Too bad that truth's a told. Setting fire to the fields once naked, now revealed. Baby, let's grow old. Baby, 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 baby. Let's grow old. Oh, I'll settle for forever. Come on, baby, it's what we know. Our wishes, what a wishes, but a lie would be delicious. Baby, let's grow old. Let's grow old. Oh, we'll buy that house upon the hill. Oh, let's be that story told. Oh, we'll foreplay in the kitchen. Hell, I'll even do the dishes. Baby, let's grow